Hi guys, and welcome back. In today's video, the problem I'm addressing is this leaking water pump on a 2000 Chevy Blazer. I had water dripping from, it looked like from the back of the engine for a while, on and off. And I couldn't figure out where that leak was coming from. I thought for sure it was the heater core, which that still may be leaking. But today, when I went to start up, and I find water in the front of the vehicle. Looking underneath, I found this drip. So just to make sure, I'm going to remove this fan shroud so I could get a mirror under there to make sure that's where the water's coming from. And to remove this, there's just a couple of bolts. You have, these are 10 millimeters. There's 3 on top. And there's a few, I don't know if the camera could pick it up. There's a few right in the corner here. And then there's another 2 in this corner. Once I remove this, I'll be able to get a mirror under there just to make sure before I start taking it apart any further. I'm going to do this video step by step. After I remove one part, I'll be back to show the next part that I'll be removing. Now I have those 7 bolts taken out, and before we go any further, you have this vent hose that has to be removed, and there's just a clip over here. Put a screwdriver into that, it pops right open. Just move this out. We have these hoses. I'm going to put the camera down. I don't have the tripod out today. Just going to lift these hoses and remove this fan. Well guys, this just got a little more complicated than I wanted it to be. I dropped the screw from above down into this pan and I can't find it. Plus I can't get a good view to show you that that water pump is leaking. So I'm going to remove this pan, the skid plate. There's 2 bolts here, 1 in the back, 2 on the other side, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe they're 15 millimeter. I had this off once before when I had to work on tie rod ends. It's not a big deal to take it off, just a little more complicated. This is not necessary to remove the water pump. Plus I have to change the oil. Normally you would just open this flap and get to the oil filter in there, but while I have it off, I'll be doing the oil change on this also. To change your oil, all you have to do is open this flap and it gives you access to the oil filter. So I'm going to take this off, get that bolt out, and then you'll be able to see that water pump leaking, if indeed it is the water pump. Your water pump's right about over here, and this is dripping just about here. Then again, it could just be a leaky hose. These hoses, I never changed the hoses on this vehicle, and I had it for several years. So with that said, I'm going to take this off, and I'll be back once it's done. Alright guys. There's that bolt I couldn't find, and trying not to get this camera wet. I really can't get a good view in here, but you can see where this water's dripping down. And the water, that's not the water pump there. The water pump is above that. I can't see what this camera's picking up. I'm trying to shield it from the water that's dripping down here. The water pump, it's going to be tough. The water pump, if you can get a view of it, is up there. Guys, I'm going to play around with this a little bit more off camera just to make sure. Before I start taking everything apart, I do want to make sure it's the water pump that's leaking. From the rust that's around that pump and everything, I would say yes, but the way this is dripping here, if you can see that, I'm just moving the camera, I'm not sure what it's picking up. But she's dripping down pretty quick over here. Now, with the water pump, this isn't the pump, but when the water pump leaks, there's a weep hole on top and on the bottom, and generally she'll leak out of this bottom weep hole. But again, this isn't the water pump here. The water pump is above this, and I just can't get a view of it. Okay, I'm gonna have to go off camera, guys, and check this out a little bit more. Well, guys, from what I can see, it is the water pump. Now, a couple things. This fan is on a clutch. Years back, the fan was solid mount, but there's a clutch. We have to get this nut. We have to get this nut off. The fan is connected to the water pump with this nut. Now, you can't just hold the fan and try and turn the nut because it's on a clutch. That said, there's a couple different ways to do this. You could try to shim in between the bolts that are holding this plate on. You could try just tapping it, getting a wrench that fits, and giving it a few quick wraps with a hammer. It will spin, but if you do it a few times, it should come off. And another precaution you want to take, my battery has side mounted terminals, but I did cover it up just in case a wrench should slip or something should go awry. Or you could just disconnect the battery to play safe. Now, while you're doing this, you want to check your belts. In this case, this belt is split. Now, I don't know if this was split all along, or if it just happened to go. It was on its way and it happened to go because I was tapping this nut with the hammer and it put more stress on it. Either way, this belt has to be changed. And while you're at it, if you have the time, a good recommendation is to change your thermostat at the same time. The whole system is going to be flushed anyway, so you may as well change the thermostat. You're going to put new coolant in there. And the shame of this is, a while back my radiator was plugged and I did a complete clean out on this. I went from the Dex Cool to the green antifreeze, and I pumped about 40 gallons of fluid through this. You don't want that fluid going on the ground. If you have pets, it's sweet for the pets. They'll eat it, they'll lick it up, and it's a poison for them, and you don't want to pollute. I captured mine with a pan. It took forever, and there's a few places that'll take it. In my area, there's car washes that do oil changes. They'll take the antifreeze. A lot of the shops will take the oil but not the antifreeze. So just call around and there will be somebody that you could take it. It's just a little bit of a pain if you're doing the flush. But that said, I'm getting off topic. I did loosen this nut by hitting it with the hammer. I'm going to take this fan off. You want to be careful you don't drop the fan. You don't want to crack this. And you can hold on to that piece while you're trying to remove the fan and the clutch, that nut. This will be a big help also. And again, they sell these as jar openers. They sell them, I believe I got this at a flea market one time. I just can't find a larger one. Fan and the clutch are off. Now the next step is to remove these 4 bolts. They're 13 millimeters. I'm leaving the belt on to give this a little bit tension when I go to remove them. If these won't come off, if you have an impact wrench, that'll work great. If you don't have an impact wrench, you can always put a wrench against one of the opposite ones, hold it down, and give it a little tap, similar to what we did with the clutch. Once the belt is off, we'll remove. All right, guys, I'm back. I loosened these bolts, dropped one down below, and these bolts here are 13 millimeter. I'm going to take these bolts off. I'm going to release the tension on here. You can either use the ratchet, or if you have a breaker bar, just to pull it one way and it'll release the tension on this belt. Push down on this and it releases the tension on the belt. You can pull this belt off. What I'm also going to do is take this pulley off. I don't know if you can see it here, but there's a hose back here that has to be removed. By pulling this pulley off, it'll make it easier to get to that hose. I'm trying to get this in the best light. Be careful you don't lose any of these parts back here. With this pulley off, you can get to this hose a little easier, a lot easier. So these 2 hoses have to come out, and you might be able to get a better view. Also, to get those hoses off, I'm either going to use a vice grip, or I have these offset needle nose pliers. Whichever one works easier, that's what I'll use to get it off. In addition to that, this isn't necessary, but I bought this kit from Harbor Freight, and it's to remove hoses. When I grab the hose, I'm going to use it to twist this hose to loosen it up, and then usually I put a screwdriver underneath. I'm going to put this under to pull it up. So if you have this tool, it's very useful. If you don't have it, just use a pair of channel locks. That's how I've done it for years before I had that tool. Once the belt is off, the hose is off, this pulley's off, there's 4 bolts that hold the water pump on. I don't know if this camera's picking it up. I can't see. There's 1, 2 on this end, 1, 2 on the other end. and those are 14 millimeter. I'm just moving this camera around to see. I'm not going to show me unbolting every bolt coming out. Well guys, it's off. When I removed the 4 bolts, note, this bolt down here, water came out. So the bolt that goes through here goes through a water jacket. So you want to use some sealer on this thread over here. I don't have the manual, but I'm sure if you bought new bolts, the sealer would be on it. So if you want to put a little sealer on all these bolts, just a little bit on the now, looking at the back of this pump, it looks like the leak isn't from the weep hole, but rusted right through this back plate. I don't know if the camera can pick it up. Let's see if I can. With the sun and the shadows, it's hard to get a good view of this. Get it here. Right here, there's a pinhole. I believe this is where this was leaking from, because you can see this whole back plate is rusted. It's really rusted down in here, and there is rust by the bottom weep hole. Either way, this pump has to be replaced, but I've never seen them rot out like that before. Now, on the block, again, I can't see what the camera's picking up. Hopefully it's getting a view. Where this pump goes on, here's where the 2 bolts are on the side. You want to make sure the surface is clean. It looks like the 2 gaskets are on the pump, but I can't get a good view of this. I'm going to have to get a mirror to see what it actually looks like, or go by this video that I'm showing you. And over here, this is where the pump mounts. And by the way, removing that pulley over here was a good way to go. This bottom hose was a little bit of a bugger to get out. This pulley right here would barely move before. Might have been the reason why that belt failed on me. What I did when this was off, I used my mixture of transmission fluid and mineral spirits. I lubricated the back of it, spun it around until it went free, wiped it out really good, spun it several times, make sure it was dry, and put it back on. And if these hoses are in good shape, you don't have to replace them. Your bottom hose could be replaced now, but the bottom hose generally doesn't get as much wear and tear as the top one, because the water going into the bottom hose is coming from the radiator and it's cooling off going into the block. The top hose is where you're getting all that heat. That's your choice. If the hose is in good shape, you want to replace it, replace it. If not, well, at some point you'll have to. That said, I'm going to order the parts that I need. Once I get these parts, I'll be putting it back together. And again, what I'm going to do, what it looks like before and after, and we'll take it from there.
Well guys, that's a wrap. I hope you found this video useful, and if so, give it a like and pass it along. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe. Until next time, stay safe.